Welcome to High Ridge House's monthly metaphysical talk. My name is Gabby Winkle, and I'm the development associate here, and this is Susie West, who's the business manager. These talks were established over a year ago by Maravik Mabaneg, who was our ED and earlier our development director for nearly a decade. As those of you who are on our mailing list know, Maravik's last day was Wednesday, June 16th. She has been named the new ED of Broadview in California. We will miss her and wish her much joy and success. Today's speaker is Alan Bashor, a practitioner in California. Both Susie and I first met Alan when he was the young and hip Dean of Men at Principia College, and when we were both students.
So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Alan. Since graduating from Principia College, Alan has served the Christian Science movement in a variety of different roles. As an active member, he has served his local branch church and Christian Science Teachers Association in elected and appointed roles. He has also had the privilege to serve on the boards of Sunnyside Foundation in Dallas and the Principal Foundation in Kansas City, as well as the Principia Alumni Board. Alan has also served on the boards of 2 Christian Science nursing facilities, the Leaves in Dallas and 12 Acres in San Francisco. In his working career, Alan served as the Dean of Men at Principia College. Later, he was the VP of Human Resources for a diversified manufacturing company, and then with his extensive human resources and operating management experience, achieved his own business ownership. This continued until Alan was offered the CEO position by the Albert Baker Fund in 2008. A position, he says, gave me the opportunity to pay back the movement for the blessings that were so generously given to me by Christian Scientists throughout the years. Alan was CEO at Albert Baker for 11 years until he became a journal-listed Christian Science practitioner last year. Wow, talk about being about his father's business.
Okay, so everyone, let's welcome Alan Bashor.
You're muted, Alan. We can't hear you.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. Before I get started, I want to tell all of you a very special story about New York City that has meant a great deal to me. New York, in my own experience as a Christian Scientist, has held a special place. It's really come to mean what is good and important and active and significant about Christian Science in the world we live in. It's right in the middle of the world's unfoldment and activity, its history, and its important work. But what I wanted to tell you, and this is really something. A few years ago, I was playing golf in Sacramento, and the starter invited a guest or a visitor to play in our foursome. Turns out he was a retired policeman from New York City. He had been a policeman for many years in the city, and he had decided that when all was said and done, that he would move to the West Coast and sort of taste the water out here. After our round, we sat down for lunch, and I told him what I did. At the time, I was working for the Albert Baker Fund, so I explained that I work for an organization that provides resources for the education and development of Christian Scientists around the world. And when I said Christian Science, he said, "Wait a minute." And then he told me a story about being a beat cop in Manhattan years ago. And one day he walked by the Christian Science Church on Central Park, and the members were out in front of the church handing out a book. He didn't take the book. He didn't have any place to put it while he was walking around, but he listened to what the people were saying, and he thought, I should come back and look into that. Well, he didn't, and probably 30 years passed, and here I am playing golf with him, or sitting around for lunch after a round of golf, and he tells me about this, and I said, well, did you ever get the book? And he said, no, I didn't, but he was struggling a bit with some physical problems at the time. And I said, you know what? I have one in my car. And so I gave it to him. And the thing that struck me was how far reaching this work that's being done in New York is. And I am and will always be grateful for that. So let's get started. Victory, anyone? I am. Isn't that why you're here? Perhaps it was the promise of a victory that brought you into Christian Science. Or haven't you felt that the hard-fought victories along the way have kept you in Christian Science? I'm sure that it's just your innate desire to fight the good fight and to win that brought us together today. Thank you all for being here. Before we get going too far, I want you to know that I see some friends in attendance today who have shown me what victory looks like in Christian Science. Sure, you know who you are. Thank you for being here. I like knowing that you brought high expectations here today. After all, it's New York. A win would be good, wouldn't it? High Ridge House has been feeding our desire to fulfill the promise of Isaiah. He will swallow up death in victory, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from off all faces. That's Isaiah 25:8. Let's not allow today to disappoint. It might help you to understand how I have developed my high regard for victory. I grew up in a household of athletes. Dad owned a sporting goods store, and my two older brothers attended college on athletic scholarships. Household chatter during my boyhood centered on sports, teams, games, hard work, and winning. Character development in the early years came on the field with the tears and triumphs of competition. I first learned that winning is about not losing. The scoreboard showed me if I won or lost. In my formative years, winning was very important to me. My desire to outscore my opponent and my fear of being outscored was what I thought about all the time. During this time, my mom and I went to the Christian Science Church almost every Sunday. In Sunday school, my teachers saw and appreciated how important winning was to me. Our agreement was that I would bring the things that were getting in the way of my success on the field to Sunday school so we could consider them from the standpoint of Christian Science. At one time or another, I brought my physical aches and pains and limitations, problems with pregame jitters, and even misunderstandings with coaches and teammates to class. And being true to their words, my Sunday school teachers and some other church members came to my games. And after Dad passed on, they even took me out for post-game recaps, complete with inspiration and ice cream. In a sense, they were my mentors. By their actions, they set the standard of Christian Science membership, church membership, and Sunday school teaching for me. In Sunday school, I was also given a door unlocking biblical model for facing up to fearful opponents. The story of David and Goliath in 1 Samuel chapter 17, with its drama and its subplots, along with its prophetic significance, captured me immediately. Over time, the spiritual meaning of the epic battle provided several smooth mental stones for my life pouch. Since then, different aspects of the story have served as my shield and sword when I was making choices or facing all manner of contests. Another lasting outcome of my Sunday school days was I found that church is where to go for help. I found answers there and steadily gained confidence in Christian Science. Mrs. Eddy has explained what was happening to me in this familiar citation from the textbook. All that really exists is the divine mind and its idea. And in this mind, the entire being is found harmonious and eternal. The straight and narrow way is to see and acknowledge this fact, yield to this power, and follow the leadings of truth. The fight to win for God's sake, coupled with a growing realization that the way in Christian Science is straight and narrow, made sense to me. Though hard to do at times, it always felt right. And when it mattered most, prayer and Christian Science has met my needs. It was a Christian Science healing in college of a painful injury during a practice that totally changed my outlook on life. When I graduated from high school, I went to Principia College to play football and baseball. The testimony of my healing of the injury I sustained in football practice my freshman year was published in the August 1979 Christian Science Journal. The healing proved the power and authority of the word as it had been presented to me in Sunday school. What happened, what had appeared Goliath-like on the field, was defeated with the smooth stone of divine truth slung with precision. I like to think I became a stone slinger that day. With this resounding victory over error, the possibility of victories elsewhere in my life opened up. And then after college, when success on the field, at home, in the office, and at church was important humanly, I learned through my tears and triumphs that truth is always the victor. Mrs. Eddy says this on page 380 in Science and Health, our textbook. It didn't take long to appreciate that the path to health and harmony is straight and narrow. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. That's from Deuteronomy 6. Have one God and no others. Don't worship graven images. Line up your actions with your talk. Do not get too busy to honor God on the Sabbath. Honor your family. Don't accept murder, stealing, and adultery as entertaining in any forms. And don't gossip and don't covet. Like the tares in Jesus' parable, the carnal mind's suggestions have to be gathered and then burned, just like Goliath had to be killed and beheaded. This permits our wheat to grow. In our prayerful daily baptism, spirituality is calling us to sacrifice materiality and animalism. And don't you think purification and moral courage is what our leader expects Christian Scientists to find each day when they pray the daily prayer and the rule for motives and acts and alertness to duty from the church manual? Mrs. Eddy was spot on when she wrote in the textbook, "The objects we pursue and the spirit we manifest reveal our standpoint and show what we are winning." Our accumulated winnings each day are blessing and healing all mankind. Along the way, organizational victories have taught lessons to me that prove the far-reaching power and authority of divine principle and moral courage. Not too long ago, I learned a lesson about the relationship of a human organization to God as the absolute divine principle. In the fall, a few years ago, I worked as a high school assistant football coach. Each day before I went to school, I prayed to see that a team, in a real spiritual sense, is the expression of God. And as such, it is his spiritual idea. He created it in spirit. He owns it. Mrs. Eddy defined God in the Glossary of Science and Health as all-knowing, all-seeing, all-acting, all-wise, all-loving, and eternal. By his allness, God is the ever-present, creating, governing, coordinating, and protecting power of each of his ideas, like the team and like me. According to God's or principles divine order, the players and coaches, including me, as spiritual ideas, are God's manifestation. And we all move in harmony according to God's law. Our team was being led not by human will or mortal leaders, and not defined by personal strength or size or athleticism, but it was truly under the order of divine principle, omnipotent truth and love. And thou shalt have no other gods before me. So each day presented new opportunities to summon from the team the moral courage to do the right things. On one particular day, I walked into the coach's locker room to find Sam, our head coach, concerned with the way that the week's preparation for the Friday night game was going. Practices had been disappointing. Players weren't paying attention to the coaches. Coaches weren't communicating effectively with the players. That day, the team captains had failed to show up for their weekly huddle with Sam. More importantly, our opponent, who our team had soundly beaten each of the past 7 years, and that we were an opponent we were obviously underestimating, was much improved this year. And his coach said, if we don't wake up and get down to business, they could beat us this week at home. And coach, he said, that would not be good. And I got it. As Sam described our situation, I prayed to see how I could be helpful. And then I shared with Sam what had come to me. Sam's a Christian, and he and I had talked from time to time about our faith. I told him that Christian Science shows us that wherever we are, whatever we are doing, God is there. God is good and all-knowing. There's no force or power capable of interrupting God's perfect plan for his children. He created us all as spiritual ideas, and he holds every one of us, every one of his ideas, in harmony with each other. The Bible says God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Genesis 1:31. God is the overriding divine principle of good, of all spiritual life and action. God, as good, is in charge of the activity of all of his ideas, where everywhere and for all time. His activity is not dependent upon encumbered or is not dependent upon or encumbered by what we see materially. This applies to activity at school, in the classrooms, in the office, on the stage, in the gym, and yes, on the football field. God's love for us is life-giving, and it is constantly pouring out the wisdom and the grace we need to do whatever we have been called upon to do for the sake of good. According to Scripture, our God is law, or to put it another way, divine principle. The 10 Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount spell them out. When obeyed, his laws strengthen, guide, coordinate, and protect us. They're always close by, telling us how to be good. They protect us from all wrong. They're always there, just as close as our next thought. And sometimes we're tempted to ignore them. We look for other gods. We find excuses for taking a break from doing the right thing. Doing right, as we know, can seem hard at times, but God gives us all the ability to be what he is causing us to be. And the sooner we all yield to this principle, the better. I further explained to Sam that the principle I was talking about causes good to be seen. God's not lying in the weeds, jealously waiting to punish us for doing the wrong thing. God loves us and is always there, embracing our every good and right desire. Like a shepherd, he gathers lost sheep. He does it in the right way, at the right time, and everyone, all mankind, is blessed. When he calls us, we hear his voice. And all we need to do is let this principle guide us individually and collectively as a team. In God's own loving way, he will show us how to go. He's the shepherd, and we are the sheep. He's the teacher, and we learn from him what is right. This is the principle of the game. This truth will be victorious, whether we outscore our opponent on Friday or not. And so Sam appreciated our talk. The rest of the week, the team's usual crisp and clear focus was missing. And at halftime on Friday, we were behind by 4 touchdowns. And with the boys feeling lower than a snake's belly, they were now ready to listen. That was when the coach told them about the principle of the game. He explained that right then and there, every player and coach in the locker room must do the right thing. It had been made painfully clear what happens when you lose sight of what is right. He assured us that the terrible feeling we had would vanish when we started doing what we know is the right thing to do on each play. As Sam spoke to them, I recalled Mrs. Eddy's statement in page 327 in the textbook, "Reason is the most active human faculty. Let that inform the sentiments and waken the man's dormant sense of moral obligation. By degrees, he will learn the nothingness of the pleasures of human sense and the grandeur and bliss of spiritual sense, which silences the material or corporeal." That night was all about moral courage. We went on to play an inspired, mistake-free second half, and we won that game. But it didn't end there. 6 months later, the coach called me. "Coach Bash, talk to me about the principle of the game." He'd been asked, at the last minute to be the substitute speaker at another high school's annual awards banquet. And then, based on the relevance of his talk that night, Sam was invited to deliver his talk on the principle of the game at the National Association of High School Football Coaches annual convention later that summer. As satisfying as it was to see the team wake up and get back to doing what was right and win a game, I marveled at the way that divine principle, love, turned thought so quickly from evil to witness the dear shepherd's calling of his sheep. And as it happened to a high school football team, don't you think it happens the same way to any individual or organization striving to fulfill their higher purpose? In her miscellaneous writings, Mrs. Eddy said, "There's no excellence without labor, and the time to work is now. Only by persistent, unremitting, straightforward toil, by turning neither to the right nor to the left, seeking no other pursuit or pleasure than that which cometh from God, can you win and wear the crown of the faithful." That's on page 340. The path indeed is straight and narrow. Truth is always the victor. In Science and Health, Mrs. Eddy says to us, each successive stage of experience unfolds new views of divine goodness and love. It's from Science and Health, page 66. Aren't these successive stages like a mountain, like climbing a mountain? The higher you climb, the farther you see. So let me share some thoughts with you about Christian Science nursing. Over the years, Article 8, Section 31, Christian Science Nurse in the Church Manual, has come to reveal higher views of goodness and love on my course in life. The bylaw reads in part, a member of the Mother Church who represents himself or herself as a Christian Science nurse shall be one who has a demonstrable knowledge of Christian Science practice, who thoroughly understands the practical wisdom necessary in a sick room, and who can take proper care of the sick. That's on page 49 in the manual. Early on, I didn't look too closely at this section. I wasn't representing myself as a Christian Science nurse in a professional sense, so I ignorantly set it aside. I honestly didn't know any Christian Science nurses at the time. I was pretty busy with my family and career, and so it was. I was then invited to join the board of the Leaves, Christian Science Care Facility in Dallas. This happened just as the Mother Church was passing the responsibilities for Christian Science nursing over to the field. On the board at that time, my eyes were opened to the importance of Christian Science nursing. Looking past the board's business agenda, I began to see what a Christian Scientist who represents themselves as a Christian Science nurse really looks like. The realization was humbling. At that point, as a Christian Scientist, Article 8, Section 31 brought me face to face with some very demanding questions. Alan, do you have what it takes to be a Christian Science nurse? Do you have the moral courage to have one God and stand up to evil like a nurse, the way David did when he faced the giant? Are you willing to rebuke sin, disease, and death each day, not forget or neglect your duties to God, his leader, and mankind? Can you be judged by your works or just your words? Mrs. Eddy tells us in Science and Health, we are Christian scientists only as we quit our reliance upon that which is false and grasp the true. We're not Christian scientists until we leave all for Christ. That's on page 192. The Christian scientists, science nurses, I have come to know along the way, have helped me, like few other Christian scientists, to see what it really takes to be a Christian scientist. They truly live the Christianity of Christian Science. Article 8, Section 31 of the manual has helped me appreciate Mrs. Eddy's statement in the First Church of Christ Scientists and Miscellany, of this I am sure, that each rule and bylaw in this manual will increase the spirituality of him who obeys it, invigorate his capacity to heal the sick, to comfort such as mourn, and to awaken the sinner. It's on page 230. During this period in my life, I faced a very challenging organizational crisis that I have since come to realize was resolved when I accepted my actual role in the proceedings to be that of a Christian Science nurse. The realization came in a meeting room and not in a sick room. Time was running out on a contract between the company I worked for and the labor union that represented the employees at our largest manufacturing operation. At midnight, 24 hours before the old contract expired, the time had come for me to deliver the company's best and final offer. I told them I'd present it in 3 hours. At the time, I did not yet see what I could propose that I felt the union would accept. Negotiations had been contentious, and clearly the mental spear I'd been carrying and the rigid armor I was wearing was not holding up. My arguments and requests were not working. Fearing defeat on the field at 3 a.m. and overrun by doubt, I took off the armor, put the sword down, and called my practitioner. He gave me the smooth stone I needed. It was the first of 5 postulates Mrs. Eddy gives us as the chief stones in the temple of Christian Science. Life is God, good, and not evil. It's on Science and Health, page 288. God's omnipresence was the fact, and evil was not. I didn't need to be afraid. The path would open up. What happened next was life-changing. At my 3 a.m. offer was greeted with defiance and disdain like I had never seen before. It was full of the harshness of Goliath's threatening rant from 1 Samuel 17. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. With his thunderous attack from across the table, my committee members, as well as the unions, began packing up their things, believing the battle was lost. A strike seemed inevitable. But while my counterpart was delivering his threatening and fearful verbal attack, instead of responding in kind, I listened and heard the solution to our dilemma. So I asked permission to make one more proposal. My request was reluctantly granted. I told my team that I heard through the thunder the answer we were looking for, and that we'd have something to present at 6 a.m. I presented my second final offer with respect and understanding at 6:30 a.m., and it was accepted. I've since come to see that it was the ethics and listening ear of the Christian Science nurse in the heart of the battle and David's stone slinging that won the day. A knowledge of Christian Science proved that no evil condition of thought can argue, suggest, or make any laws to dominate, control, intimidate, or crush me, or bring any evil to pass upon me, or shut out my consciousness, shout of my consciousness any good. The demonstrable knowledge of Christian Science practice and the practical wisdom necessary in a meeting room delivered proper care with precision. God's omnipresence and the willingness to accept it wins. God is always the victor. Just before moving to Sacramento and joining ABF, while I was coaching a morning football practice, an injury to my hand took my love of church and for Christian Science nursing to yet a higher level. That morning, I had an immediate need to bandage a wound on my hand. The head coach, Sam again, an athletic trainer, felt the wound was too serious for them to touch and suggested I head to the hospital. Instead, I called a Christian Science practitioner for help and headed home. He took up the work right away. I then called the journalisted Christian Science nurse in the city where I was living, but was unable to reach her. My out-of-town practitioner was unfamiliar with who I might turn to for help, so we prayed to know that God's omnipresence that day was caring for me as divine spirit's immortal self-expression, uninjured, clean, and pure. I felt the need to have the wound cleaned and bandaged, and since I didn't see another choice, I drove myself to a nearby ReadyCare medical clinic. The medical doctor at the clinic said that an ambulance should be called at once to take me to the hospital. He felt I needed surgery within 2 hours. Without surgery, he predicted I would lose my finger or worse. I thanked him and returned to my car, called my practitioner, and then cried. What should I do? Where should I go? In prayer, I took myself to church. I knew that Christian Science, the Comforter, heals. As Mrs. Eddy tells us in Science and Health, subject sickness, sin, and death to the rule of health and holiness in Christian Science. You ascertain that this science is demonstrably true, for it heals the sick and sinning as no other system can. I knew that my church is the rock. And as promised in Mrs. Eddy's hymn, truth engrounds me on the rock upon life's shore, against which the winds and waves can shock, oh, nevermore. A familiar Bible verse from Deuteronomy came to me. Be strong and of good courage, fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, he it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. It's from Deuteronomy 31, verse 6. I knew that my church, the superstructure of truth, safely guards me from any harm as the Christ, divine love's presence and power, cares for and watches over me. Divine principles promise is good. No vain attempt to attach the claim of injury to the spiritual I that I am could take hold of me. As Mrs. Eddy says, the spiritual real man that I am has no birth, no material life, and no death. Again, right there in the parking lot, truth was indeed providing the smooth stones I needed. Comforted, I drove home. Later that afternoon, still unable to reach the Christian Science nurse, I went to the emergency room of the nearby hospital and asked to have the wound cleaned and bandaged. The doctor rehearsed some of what I had heard earlier in the day, but when I told him I was a Christian Scientist and receiving Christian Science treatment from a Christian Science practitioner, his tone changed. He had worked with a Christian Scientist in the past and had seen a marvelous healing. He then had his nurse clean and bandage the wound, which she did kindly and carefully. At night, I rested peacefully. The next day, I changed the bandage myself and went to our morning practice. And with the continuous support of the practitioner, I didn't miss a practice and was bandage free in 10 days. Throughout this experience, I had access to the care I needed. My eyes were opened to God's ever presence, always accessible. Truth is always the victor. Now, since this healing, I've had the blessed opportunity to watch with deep gratitude and praise our church's response around the world to the call for Christian Science nursing. The Word of God, emanating from Article 8, Section 31 of the Church Manual, is calling us all to grow our demonstrable knowledge of Christian Science and with practical wisdom put into practice wherever our path leads us. It's calling Christian Scientists in all walks of life to take proper care of the sick. The Christian Science nurse within us is being invited into a sick room or a conference room or a living room or a boardroom to prove our knowledge of Christian Science practice and our understanding of the practical wisdom necessary there. That caring sense in the heart of Christian Scientists has been aroused and is active. Don't you feel it? It's inseparable from our true being as divine love's self-expression. Today, the manifold activities of Christian Science nursing care providers and the training schools, the National Fund for Christian Science Nursing in the United States, and in the ongoing collaborative efforts to improve access and availability of Christian Science nursing care and training are expanding. Article 8, Section 31 is rousing the consciousness of individual members of the Mother Church and its branch churches, as well as the employees and volunteers of the many philanthropic organizations serving Christian Scientists to become the best Christian Science nurses they can be. Ours is to lead with our demonstrable knowledge of Christian Science practice and wisely take care of the needs of those who come to us for help, whether clerking at a branch church, running a business, processing applications for summer camp, raising money for a worthy cause, chairing a church board meeting, teaching a Sunday school class, being a parent or grandparent, or just inviting friends to get together to have a good time. Follow the Master's command in Matthew and see. And as ye go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. Freely ye have received, freely give. This means be Christian scientists, be a Christian scientist who represents himself or herself as a Christian Science nerd. And remember, truth is always the victor. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alan. That was so wonderful. And what an amazing healing, and all the wonderful words you said about our wonderful Christian Science nurses. That was so inspiring. We're now going to open it up to questions. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. And if anyone wants to just say something, they can unmute themselves. Oh,
Thank you, Alan. That was wonderful.
Kate.
Hi, yes, I want to thank Alan also. That was a tremendous talk. Very, very inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen.
from Randy Slaughter, I have to leave, but I want to thank you all, and especially Alan for his great talk. Wonderful testimonies, Alan. Thank you. Gratitude, Alan and High Ridge House. And this talk is being recorded and should be up on our website, which is highridgehouse.org, probably before the end of the day.
Oh, I also want to thank him for the sports analogies and healings, you know, with grandchildren in baseball, lacrosse, and golf, everything. It just, all the examples were so helpful as a grandparent. And I wasn't raised in Christian Science, so I really appreciate, you know, hearing about how his family taught him, and the Sunday school teachers taught him how to apply the divine principle. And this works, as he said, in the boardroom or on the football field, wherever we are in our church service. Thank you again so very much.
You know, Gabby, I want to mention something that happened to me a little bit later in my life, and perhaps our audience can appreciate this. For me, the lessons were taught while I was participating in organized athletics, and it was always, I don't know that it was a passion, but it was always a hope that my children, when they were able to, that they would kind of follow in my path, and that they would find and they would learn the lessons as I did on the field of competition. Well, I was reminded that their father is not me, and that the lessons that he teaches where he wants them to be taught, and teaches them in a way that address the child's individual desire to be the best they can be. And in that spirit, I allowed it to be okay. Not that I had any say in it, but I allowed it to be okay when my oldest son put down his baseball bat and he took off his football shoes and picked up the clarinet and pursued his love of music. And as I watched him, he was having many of the same opportunities I had in my athletic endeavors to see how Christian Science, how the Word of God helped and supported him to become the best clarinetist he could be and to perform at distinguished levels of youth and a youth orchestra, and to engage in competitive situations where he turned to God to help him. And I love that. It's whenever the child is striving to be the best they can at whatever it is their choice to become good at. The only agreement that needs to be cut at the Sunday school level is that they agree to bring the obstacles that are placed in their path to class to talk over from the standpoint of Christian Science. I've loved that. And I think we have to be, well, we don't have to be anything. We already are. But being willing to let God teach, isn't that the point? So that's it.
Thank you. And just a few more comments in our chat. One from Vicky Brademan, who is a former board member at High Ridge House. Wonderful inspiration. Can't wait to share this with others. Thank you, Alan and High Ridge House. And then from Jan True, loved your talk, Alan, very helpful, and thank High Ridge House. And this is from, let's see, Elizabeth Beal. Alan, thank you for adding the account of your son who moved from athletics to music. Soul shows up in everything we do.
Yeah.
And then from, oh, so many, from Marilyn Bradshaw, who is a current High Ridge House board member. Thank you so much, Alan. You gave us such helpful, practical ideas to put into use. Your experiences are wonderful illustrations, and you've motivated us to higher achievement. Cheryl, thank you for waking me up to my demonstrating the qualities of nursing in all I do. Alan, so appreciated the call to rise to call of Christ in all the occasions of our life. There is no excellence without labor. Thank you. I don't know. And then from Judith Patterson, thank you, High Ridge House, for these very inspiring monthly talks. Thank you, dear Alan, for your inspired and healing remarks today. I am so grateful to all of you.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alan. We so appreciate you here from Nigeria.
Oh my.
Thank you for sharing your wonderful experience.
Oh, a dear friend. How wonderful is that?
I know we have callers, we have listeners from all over the globe. This is always a very exciting day, Friday at High Ridge House.
And you know, Gabrielle, when I worked at the Albert Baker Fund, the great privilege that I had was on several occasions to visit students and our Christian Science friends and supporters in Africa. And I will tell
I would
you,
like to express gratitude to Alan. Also, I have worked with him with Albert Baker, and I also would like to go back to years ago when my mother was on the board of High Ridge House. And I remember as a child gleaning from her the expectancy of healing and an answer from God in all situations. And I think Alan was encouraging us also to apply that same ability to listen and expect answers from God to unfold. And I especially appreciated at the end, Alan, when you were trying to find someone to address cleaning the wound without doing anything else. And you were led in that case to go to a, whatever it was, a medical center or whatever, to get it cleaned. And I too have had that situation for myself and in working with as visiting and care chairman for my church, where we can expect the right answer to that situation that will bring healing for us, no matter where it is. And we can expect that oneness of communication, both to us and to the nurse or to even the physician that might be attending. It's just really wonderful to know that healing is unlimited, it's to be expected, and we can demonstrate the truth by listening and expecting God's answer. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. That's wonderful. You know, when I went to the hospital that day to have the wound cleaned, the first thing they asked me in the emergency room was, "What is your faith?" And so I told them Christian Science, and they said, "Well, we don't have that on our list." So they added it, and then I waited, and it was just wonderful that I was connected with a doctor, very serious minded. He explained to me the protocols that were in place at the hospital that would determine what he felt had to be done. And I listened. And then I told him I was a Christian Scientist and receiving Christian Science treatment. And he immediately changed. It's like he became a nurse. He fell in. And I don't know. It was one of those things that you then, as we went forward at Albert Baker Fund, and I began to work with the dearest, most precious people to address some of the sustainability issues of Christian Science nursing. And I began to see the natural evolution of the emergence of the desire among Christian Scientists to make Christian Science nursing readily available. I loved it. Well, anyway, that's it. I'll be quiet.
Okay, and I see that Christine Polito, our dear friend, would like to say something.
Unmute myself. Thank you so much, Alan. These just wonderful, wonderful testimonies and practical proofs. They meant so very much. They really were living and proving Christian Science nursing. And that's what really came through, these beautiful testimonies of living and praying those qualities of Christian Science nursing, as well as seeing those expressed by others. To see those wonderful qualities in the testimonies you shared. Just a wonderful, wonderful talk. Thank you, Alan, for all your work. And thank you, Gabby. Thank you, Susie, Highridge House and all. Just very grateful.
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.
Hi, Alan. I'm on the phone, so I loved your talk, and I'm definitely looking forward to hearing it again to get the most I can out of it. I loved, which I had always heard from science when I came into it. I was not born into it, the expectation of healing. But I wanted to know what you might offer for someone who has had an issue for over a year and, you know, has been getting, you know, inspiration and good ideas and practitioner help, but needs, you know, like needs to make the demonstration to know that the healing is done and witness it.
Well, I think you've placed your question in front of the right people. Christian Science touches the very heart and soul of our experience. It moves within us like a cool breeze. It flies above us like a dove. It embraces us and it comforts and raises us up out of the suggestion that we are something other than what our Father, Mother, God has caused us to be. And when we see that, we let it go. We see that and we let it go. And it doesn't have intelligence or authority. It's not something we will. It's not a function of our scholasticism or our words or our whatever. It is the Christ that touches us right where we are, and it heals us. And that's what's happening. That's what happens. And you are free.
Thank you so much, Alan,
Thank
for
you.
such a wonderful, wonderful Friday afternoon talk. We are so grateful. I wish you a happy Father's Day, as well as all the fathers and mothers in our audience today. So everyone have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you next month.
Thanks, Gabby. We
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Alan.